Live from Richmond, Virginia, CBS 6 presents the Democratic Debate for Attorney General, sponsored by the Democratic Party of Virginia. Now, tonight's moderator, Bill Fitzgerald.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight's debate features the two Democrats seeking their party's nomination for Attorney General. Let's go over the rules. Each candidate will deliver a 90-second opening and closing statement, the order of which was determined by a coin flip. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to each question, and after those exchanges, the first candidate to respond will get an additional 60 seconds for a rebuttal. Any additional rebuttal time will be offered in a fair way at my discretion as moderator. Now let's meet the candidates. Joining us this evening are Attorney General Mark Herring. He is seeking his third term in office. And Delegate Jay Jones, who represents Norfolk in the General Assembly. As decided by the coin toss, Attorney General Herring will deliver the first opening statement. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, good evening. As your Attorney General, I have proven I could deliver results and win when the stakes are high. I've won a landmark case on marriage equality, blocked Trump's Muslim ban, won court cases to protect our new gun safety laws, and returned over $400 million to Virginia consumers. And I fought all the way to the Supreme Court to protect health care. As Virginia Democrats, we have a clear choice in this primary between my proven record of protecting Virginians and expanding rights, and Delegate Jones, who unfortunately has shown at important moments doesn't get it right and makes the wrong choices. When I was fighting to shut down dangerous payday lenders, he was working to protect them. And when I was fighting to protect survivors of domestic violence, he was one of just 6 legislators to vote against stronger protective orders. And when I was working to create Virginia's first civil rights office, he was trying to derail those efforts with a fatally flawed proposal of his own that would actually roll back civil rights protections for women, people with disabilities, and LGBT Virginians. You know, we may agree on a lot of progressive policies, but there's a clear choice in this race between, I've shown that I've been able to win even the toughest fights, and I've proven twice that I've been able to win statewide, keep this job in Democratic hands, and continue the progressive work. That's why I'm asking again for your support as Attorney General, the people's lawyer.
Thank you, sir. Delegate Jones.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you to WTVR for hosting us tonight. It is my pleasure to be with you, and in fact, my presence here is even unlikely. As the descendant of slaves, 5 generations back on both sides, I think about what they would think and how they would feel about their descendant who has the opportunity to be Virginia's first Black Attorney General. My grandfather was a civil rights pioneer in Norfolk who had my uncle and my father integrate a school back then in 1960. So every time I think about how I'm frustrated or angry or dejected about what I see, I know I stand on their shoulders and that we have so much work to do. Now, tonight you're going to hear a lot about the past from Mark, but this election is about the future. All the experience in the world doesn't mean a thing if you've got to be pushed to do the right thing. We need an Attorney General who will reach for higher heights, who won't settle for the bare minimum, and who won't bend to whichever way the political winds are blowing in that moment. I am so proud to have the support of Governor Ralph Northam, Congressman Bobby Scott, Congresswoman Elaine Luria, former Attorney General Mary Sue Terry, the first woman elected statewide in the history of this Commonwealth and the last Democrat to hold this office, along with 30+ members of the General Assembly who know that we have the vision and the values to rise to meet this moment, to bring about true and equal justice in this Commonwealth when we face this moment, 400 years in our history, to really seize this opportunity to look ahead, to move forward, to forge a new path together. And I look forward to sharing my vision with you all tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate. The first question now goes to Attorney General Herring. We learned this week just how vulnerable we are to cyber attack. The Colonial Pipeline hack caused many to panic. It led to long lines at gas stations, even to some reports of apparent price gouging. And then at one point on Thursday, more than 50% of the stations in Virginia reported fuel outages. So as Attorney General, what can be done to better protect Virginians from attacks like this? And what kind of action should be taken should price gouging actually be confirmed?
Well, as Attorney General, I have worked hard to strengthen our work to go after crimes on the internet. That's some of the most difficult kinds of cases we do to protect our children, which is, what's more important than protecting our children. And also to protect people's privacy from being stolen from them. And so those are all important considerations. And when I was working to protect against price gouging, not just during this crisis, but also during the pandemic. When the state of emergency hits, unfortunately, we found that while most people pull together to try to make it through a crisis, there are always some who try to take advantage of people. And that's why I work so hard to combat price gouging. Price gouging will not be tolerated in Virginia, and we will go after anyone who engages in it. That's what I did during the pandemic to help us all try to get through this as safely as possible. That's what I've done when the gas pipelines went down, to make it clear to Virginians that they can count on me to crack down on price gouging wherever it happens.
Thank you, Delegate Jones.
Well, certainly what we saw this week was nothing short of terrifying and horrifying. And a crisis that hits that close to home certainly makes you think about where we are in our trajectory. And as Attorney General, we will prioritize consumer protection like we've never seen. Build upon the successes that we've had together over the last several years, but also figure out how we can redeploy and reimagine this old office in a new way to rise to meet the challenges of right now. Cyber attacks and cyber terrorism are things that are of the pressing moment, things that will plague us going forward for decades. And we've got to make sure that our Attorney General's office is ready. It stands nimble, stands there to protect folks all across this Commonwealth. This is about going to those lost and forgotten areas, making sure that we roll up our sleeves and put ourselves in front of every single Virginian, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what you look like, because these attacks, these terrible situations can impact all of us, and it's now on us to band together as we forge a new path ahead together. And as Attorney General, I look forward to leading that fight day in and day out.
Attorney General Herring, you have an additional 60 seconds.
It is important, vitally important for the Attorney General to protect consumers. Unfortunately, Delegate Jones' track record shows he can't be counted on there. When I was working to crack down on dangerous predatory lenders, Delegate Jones was actually supporting the predatory lenders and authored a bill that would have allowed them to charge 350% interest. These are hardworking, struggling Virginians just trying to get by. Now, when you're the Attorney General, it is really important to know, for Virginians to know that you've got their back. And over the last 8 years, Virginians can trust me to do that. The special interests and the wealthy, they've got lots of tools to protect their interests, but everybody else, ordinary Virginians, hardworking Virginians, need to know they've got an Attorney General like me who will stand up and fight for them against the special interests, who would have taken advantage of them. Thankfully, Delegate Jones's bill was defeated, and the measure that we worked on with the advocates passed to protect Virginia consumers.
Bill, I would just say that the Attorney General knows that he and I supported the exact same bill, and I was happy to work with Delegate Bagby, the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, who has endorsed my campaign, to put forth a bill.
Sir, you can use your additional time on your next question if you like. We're going to move to the second question. Today marks the end of National Police Week, Delegate Jones. This comes as law enforcement's under a microscope like never before. Some say reform is an urgent necessity after the murder of George Floyd, other police-involved deaths, and incidents like the pepper spraying, for example, of Army officer Karen Nazario in Windsor. Others are staunchly defending the police, saying that unjustified shootings and brutality are actually rare and that officers have to make split-second decisions in tense and often unpredictable situations. Attorneys General walk a fine line here. Where do you stand?
Well, I certainly felt that knee on my neck when I watched the George Floyd video, and I felt the bullets in my back when I watched the video of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. That, as a black man, is visceral and personal for me. And that's why we've centered this campaign on justice reform, because this is the issue of the moment. It is the challenge of our time. We've got to make sure that we have an Attorney General who will lead the way, not just do the bare minimum when it becomes politically popular. We have seen that the creation of the Civil Rights Office and the Attorney General's office hasn't done much. Donovan Lynch was a man who was killed in Virginia Beach at the hands of police. Isaiah Brown was a man who was shot 10 times by a sheriff's deputy in Spotsylvania. And I would ask the Attorney General, where's the pattern and practice investigation into those situations? Virginia Beach and that family are looking for answers. Spotsylvania and that family are looking for answers. As Attorney General, my commitment will always be to the people of Virginia. We'll never play politics with people's lives. We will be there fighting for you every single day. You have that promise. You have my word.
Attorney General.
The violence that we're seeing at the hands of police is sickening, and it is unacceptable, and it has to stop. And that's why I've been calling on Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That's why I launched the largest police training program in Attorney General Office's history focusing on de-escalation and bias training. That's why when we could no longer count on President Trump to investigate departments when they engage in racially biased policing, that I went to the General Assembly and asked for authority for us to be able to do it. We got it. That law just took effect in March, and we've already put it to work in the town of Windsor and elsewhere, because accountability has to be at the center of restoring trust between communities and law enforcement they serve. And it's interesting you would bring up the Office of Civil Rights when your proposal on civil rights would have been the largest rollback in civil rights protections in modern Virginia history.
Delegate Jones, you have an additional 60 seconds.
Mark, you have a civil rights office at your disposal, and I've asked you, where is the investigation into Virginia Beach's situation, and where is the investigation into Spotsylvania? That silence is deafening. Frankly, the people of Virginia don't want to stand for anything less than full-throated accountability and transparency in all situations. We cannot pick and choose when we play politics with people's justice. We won't do that. And as Attorney General, you've got my promise that I will be there with my sleeves rolled up, no matter what the situation is, when it's tough or when it's simple. That's what this race is about. It's about standing up when things are challenging and not shirking from those situations where you might take a politically unpopular stand. You know, frankly, here in Virginia, we've got an opportunity to look ahead, to create a value system and a justice system that works for everybody. And I look forward to helping create that. We just put out a plan this week that's a comprehensive, forward-looking justice reform proposal that rises to meet this moment. We cannot afford someone who sits in that chair to sit back and wait to see which way the political winds blow. That's not the Attorney General that I will be. I will be there fighting each and every day.
All right. The next question goes to Attorney General Herring first.
Bill, would I be able to respond to his?
You can use your time. And Delegate Jones, if you're going to suggest that the silence during your time to speak is because he's not got an answer, you must allocate that time to him ahead of time and yield your time, because otherwise it sounds like your time he's not responding, and it seems almost unfair in that regard. You may use your time coming up to respond to that. In the meantime, we're going to move on to the COVID-19 pandemic, which changed life as we know it. The state health department says more than 11,000 Virginians have died, and the economy, of course, has been devastated. The impact is still being felt, but there were also significant questions raised about the constitutionality of some of the restrictions put in place. The U.S. Supreme Court has even made several rulings in favor of, for example, churches that challenge certain restrictions. In a New York case, the majority wrote, quote, "Even in a pandemic, the Constitution cannot be put away and forgotten." Do you agree?
Well, that's an important question, and I will get to that in just a moment. But to respond to Delegate Jones, he knows better than that. Right after the shooting in Virginia Beach of Donovan Lynch, I went down to Virginia Beach. I met with his father. I met with community leaders. I called for an independent investigation by an unaffiliated agency, because we can't have the same officers investigating the ones that they work alongside of, and that is happening. And our pattern and practice investigations are underway. So I am working on those, and I will continue to do that, and I will not hesitate to continue that work. As to the question about the pandemic, yes, I have worked hard to make sure that Virginia's COVID safety measures are upheld in court. There were dozens of court cases brought, and we won them all. And that has made Virginians safer, and it is because of the work that I've done to make sure that they were done in a constitutional way that protects people and at the same time keeps us all safe.
Delegate Jones.
Well, certainly the COVID pandemic has spared nobody. I think we all sitting here have friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, anybody in our life who's been impacted. I even had a colleague in the General Assembly, Senator Ben Chafin, who passed away from COVID. And as we seek to emerge from this crisis stronger than when we entered it, we know that we have challenges that face us. And I'm proud of the fact that Governor Northam has been atop our state, making sure that we have all of the necessary measures in place, and that he has been a tremendous steward. And he knows, because that's why he's endorsed my campaign, that we have an opportunity to forge this path together, and that we are ready to take on these challenges, whether it's a pandemic, consumer protection, civil rights, justice reform. This is about rising to the moment. This is about banding together. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get our children back in school safely, to return to normal. And I'm excited about the prospect of these restrictions as we ease them, because our vaccination process, that Governor Northam and the state have done such a tremendous job in getting out to those communities all across this Commonwealth.
Attorney General?
The pandemic has hurt so many people, and my heart goes out to the more than 10,000 Virginia families who've lost a loved one. And it wasn't just in terms of the medical issues. So many people have lost work, lost health insurance as a result of the pandemic. And that's why, as Attorney General, I immediately went into court and got a court order to protect against utility shutoffs so that people could stay safely in their homes. I worked to protect tenants from being evicted. And I also worked to make sure that our price gouging laws were enforced so that people couldn't be taken advantage of during the crisis. And I worked to make sure that all of those COVID safety measures were written in a way that was lawful, that protected people's rights, and at the same time protected Virginians as much as possible from the pandemic. And again, it's interesting that Delegate Jones would keep bringing up consumer protection when he has shown that Virginians can't trust him when it comes to protecting consumers over special interests.
Next question to you, Delegate Jones. And it's a question that we've done a lot of reporting on. The Legal Aid Justice Center has filed a class action lawsuit against the Virginia Employment Commission, claiming the delays and cut-off benefits that many Virginians were confronted with over the past year amount to a violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Social Security Act, and state law governing unemployment benefits. Did the VEC break the law? And what role should the Attorney General's office have in such a situation?
Well, Bill, my heart certainly goes out to all of the Virginians who have been struggling over the last year and change with this pandemic. My legislative office has fielded emails and calls and every other form of communication detailing all of the challenges that we've seen. And like I said, none of us have been spared. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are using all of the energy and resources at our fingertips to go out and work for those Virginians. I do think that we've seen some serious issues at the Virginia Employment Commission, and as Attorney General, we will use every asset at our disposal to get to the bottom of that. The job is about working for the people day in and day out. It's not about taking any days off. It's not about waiting to see what the politically popular opinion is. You've got to really roll up your sleeves, and you've got to get down and get dirty to make sure that you're fighting every day on behalf of Virginians. And I know that I am ready and capable for this task as we strive to emerge from this pandemic stronger than before, making sure that Virginians not only are protected in the workplace and with their jobs, but also all across this Commonwealth getting those vaccines that they need.
Attorney General.
As Attorney General, I have worked hard to protect workers, make sure that they have safe working conditions, fight for better wages, and I've worked hard to protect consumers. And so when I've heard the VEC wasn't paying these, that's terrible. And that needs to change, and they need to pay the benefits that are due people. But I've also worked hard to make sure that we make it through this pandemic as safely as possible, working to make sure that consumers and tenants were not evicted from their apartments, to make sure that utilities weren't cut off, and to make sure that our COVID safety measures were in place and protecting people and keeping them safe. That's been my record as Attorney General, to take on those big fights and win. And that's what I've been doing as Attorney General and will continue to do so.
Delegate Jones, you have an additional 60 seconds.
Well, I certainly want to highlight just one quick thing about worker protection. Mark just created a worker protection unit after 7.5 years in office. And it doesn't bother me that it took that long, and it doesn't bother me that it only came up after we started talking about worker protections in this campaign. What bothers me is that we're using these people as a political football. But I'm so proud of the fact that LIUNA and IBEW, two of the largest labor unions in this Commonwealth, have endorsed my campaign because they know that we have the vision, the energy, the wherewithal to go out and fight for Virginia workers all across this Commonwealth. My grandmother was a member of the union, teachers union in Norfolk, and those values are imbued within me. And now more than ever, we need someone who's going to prioritize workers to make sure that we are fighting for them. And I know that I will be that Attorney General.
Would you like an additional 30 seconds?
Yes. And I have been fighting for Virginia workers. My first job out of high school was working construction as a laborer, and I know what it's like to work a hard day's work and deserve to be paid fairly and treated fairly, and I know what it's like when you're not. And that's why I created the Worker Protection Unit, because now that we have a Democratic majority in the General Assembly, we are beginning to get stronger laws to protect workers from exploitation. And so now I can work with the General Assembly to strengthen these protections. Virginia has not always been friendly to workers under a Republican administration. That's changing. That's why I created this new unit, and we're going to continue to do that work.
All right. And I will dole that out equally as I see fit. Attorney General, this question to you again. The Commonwealth consistently ranks as one of the best states for business. That's according to reports from Forbes, CNBC, and others. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce says Virginia's right-to-work law is one of the main reasons why. Now, you and your opponent both oppose the right-to-work law, but it is state law. So is it not the Attorney General's obligation then to defend it?
Well, as I said before, my first job out of high school was working construction as a laborer. And that experience has taught me what it's like to work a hard day's work, and you deserve to be paid fairly for that work and deserve the best health care you can and safe working conditions. I believe that all workers have the right to organize and bargain collectively. And I believe that those who benefit from collective bargaining should pay their fair share. And I will continue to fight to make sure that workers are protected, and that's what I have done. That's why I created the Worker Protection Unit, to guard against worker exploitation. Now that we have a Democratic legislature that is working to protect workers more than the previous Republican-controlled legislature, I know that there will be more opportunities to strengthen those laws and make sure that Virginia is not only the best place in America for business, but that it's also the best place in America for workers and their families.
Delegate Jones.
Well, like I said, my grandmother was a member of the teachers union in Norfolk, and those values are imbued within me. And I understand the value of a hard day's work and getting everything that you should out of that job. It is important to me that we understand that we can't stand for incidents of wage theft and worker misclassification here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have to make sure that we are bolstering this brand new Worker Protection Unit that popped up only 7.5 years into Mark's term to make sure that we're fighting for workers day in and day out. But don't take my word for it. LIUNA and IBEW, they understand that we have what it takes, the wherewithal, to stand up and make sure that this can be the best state for workers as well. I've not given up the ghost that we can be the best state for business as well as being the best state for workforce. I think that's something that Virginia should strive for, but we need to really lean in and strive and look ahead to make sure that we can strengthen this Commonwealth for our workers, that we never leave them behind, and that we prioritize and value them as we should.
Attorney General.
And my work to protect workers is a part of the larger effort that I've been making to protect the civil rights of all Virginians. I have made protecting and expanding the civil rights of Virginians a cornerstone of my administration. And the Attorney General's office under my administration has been a civil rights office. And when we went to make it a permanent feature in 2019, working with Delegate Lopez, unfortunately, Delegate Jones wouldn't work with the advocates. It was even presented to his committee, and it was quiet as a church mouse. And then, when we tried again this past year, he tried to derail it with a disastrous bill that would have actually rolled back protections for women, LGBT Virginians, and others. And then, when he didn't get his way, he was the lone Democrat to join with all of the Republicans to try to defeat this landmark civil rights legislation that was supported by the NAACP, Equality Virginia, and so many other advocates for civil rights.
30 seconds, Delegate Jones.
Well, there he goes again. And Mark, you know very well that my commitment to civil rights is unflinching, and it is rich to hear you lecture me about civil rights, given that I am the descendant of slaves. My grandfather was a civil rights pioneer. I called for the creation of a civil rights office last year. And again, it doesn't bother me that you waited until it was campaign season to do it. It doesn't bother me that you had 7.5 years to create it. What bothers me is that your newfound commitment seems to only have arisen after your incident with blackface 2 years ago. And it's not that you wore blackface that bothers me. It is that empty apology that you gave us that was done to save your political career, not to commit to people's civil rights.
Let's try to stay within the rules, please. Thank you. Delegate Jones, this next question to you. Before COVID hit Virginia, we were facing another public health crisis all across the country, in fact, the opioid epidemic. It has not gone away. In fact, it has gotten worse during the pandemic. The CDC estimating overdose deaths surged by 43% in the Commonwealth from October 2019 to October 2020. What more needs to be done to combat this crisis?
Well, certainly the opioid epidemic has spared no one, and it has been a scourge here in Virginia. I actually had a childhood friend who died of an opioid overdose just blocks away from where we grew up several years ago. And That's never been lost on me how much we need to commit ourselves to making sure that we are eradicating this terrible problem. And we've done great things at the legislative level, but now we understand that there are communities that are struggling, that have been lost and forgotten. That's why we want to make sure as Attorney General, we're deploying our resources in ways that are nimble and can rise to meet this moment. We have to go to those lost and forgotten areas of this Commonwealth, whether it's the Eastern Shore, South Side, the Shenandoah Valley, or Southwest, to put ourselves in those communities and make sure that we are facilitating conversations, that we are deploying resources and assets there, because we can't stand for this any longer. And we've seen this horrible pandemic that has impacted all of us exacerbate this problem. And as Attorney General, you have my commitment that I will be there standing with you day in and day out to make sure we put this problem away.
Attorney General.
My heart goes out to all of those who have lost loved ones, a brother, a sister, mother or father, son or daughter, to an opioid overdose, and to those who are battling addiction. And I've learned so much from those who are in the recovery community. That's why I led the charge on the state's response to the opioid epidemic and rejected the failed drug policies of the past, and instead took a public health approach and said we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We have to get rid of the stigma about addiction, make sure everyone knows how easily it can happen. It can happen to anyone. And that's why I've also worked hard to hold those pharmaceutical companies who are responsible for this accountable. I have sued drug manufacturers, I have investigated them, and we are beginning to win cases and settlements now. And I went to the legislature to try to get legislation and got it to make sure that as much money as possible that we're able to get from these settlements goes directly to the communities that are hurting and to the families who are struggling with addiction.
Delegate Jones, you have another 60 seconds.
Well, I certainly applaud all of the efforts that we in Virginia have done collectively to make sure that we are combating the opioid crisis. This is something that impacts every single community statewide. But I think this highlights the importance of using the platform and pulpit of the Attorney General's office to go take our show on the road, to go meet people where they are, to make sure that while we're getting money and settlements, which is great, we also demonstrate that we have a commitment to showing up to people's communities, rolling up our sleeves and being there on the doorstep to be that figure, that facilitator, the lawyer for the people, but also the advocate for the people as well. And given the experience that I have in the legislature, the communities that I represent in Norfolk, I understand the challenges that we're facing, not just today, but the challenges ahead. And I look forward to combating this terrible, terrible epidemic as Attorney General.
All right, thank you both. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 60 seconds with the second half of this debate. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Democratic debate for the nomination for Attorney General. Our next question goes first to Attorney General Herring. Attorney General Herring, thank you for your patience. One of your responsibilities is assisting victims of crime. A number of victims, victim family members, and prosecutors in different parts of the state said the Virginia Parole Board did not properly notify them that certain inmates were being released, nor give them a chance to object. Richmond Commonwealth's attorney, Colette McKeechin, even asking the board to rescind their decision to release a man named Vincent Lamont Martin. Investigations conducted by the Inspector General found several complaints to be substantiated. Now, we know there is now an independent investigation into OSIG's report on the board's handling of the Martin case, but do the issues raised by these families and prosecutors concern you?
Well, you know, this is a situation that really calls for transparency. And unfortunately, we really haven't gotten openness and transparency from the Office of Inspector General. That would have helped a lot. But there is now an independent investigation, so we will get to those answers, but it's important to remember, and nobody should be under any illusions here. These attacks that Republicans are making, this is really a proxy for their opposition to the work we're doing on criminal justice reform and policing reform. And it is the Republicans who are trying to use this as a way to try to burnish their failed tough on crime policies from the 90s. That is not the direction that we want to go in here in Virginia. That's why we've been working so hard on criminal justice reform. And it was interesting to hear Delegate Jones bring up his criminal justice reform plan, because it looked like he had just taken a lot of stuff that we're already doing, a lot of things that we're already working on, and put it on a plan and said this is what he would do too.
Delegate Jones.
Well, Bill, as a threshold matter, I support parole and I support second chances. We have vestiges of the black codes and Jim Crow and mass incarceration woven throughout our criminal code here in Virginia. And what you're seeing is Republicans using this situation as nothing more than a political football. We can't allow for that, but we want to make sure we get to the bottom of the situation and we get all the facts in front of us so that we can figure out what's really going on here. But we did release a justice reform plan that's forward-looking, that deals with sentencing reform, that deals with the creation of a civil rights division that's got investigatory and enforcement power. It talks about ending qualified immunity, which we know will hold police officers accountable and give them transparency to the victims of those who from excessive force. We have an opportunity here to look forward, not get stuck in the past, and really lean in to this moment where Virginians are clamoring for justice reform. It is at the forefront of our campaign. In the legislature, I've led in this regard, and I look forward to doing so as Attorney General, not just waiting until the issues are politically popular to step up and try to make sure that and make people think that I've been working for them.
Attorney General?
You know, I don't know why you keep bringing up your criminal justice reform plan. It really is a reflection of what our office is already doing. But on to the question about the victims. You know, when you're Attorney General, you do work closely with victims and support them as much as possible. That's why I've worked hard to protect survivors of domestic violence. But when you had an opportunity to support survivors of domestic abuse, you didn't take it. You sided with the abusers and voted against a stronger protective order law. And when you're the Attorney General, you need to be working to protect victims, and that's what I've been doing as Attorney General. That's why I also eliminated Virginia's backlog of untested rape kits, because I heard that there were thousands. When I first came into office, there were thousands of untested rape kits. That is an injustice. And I eliminated that backlog of untested rape kits, something that only 7 other states have been able to do, and it has meant so much to survivors who know that now their Commonwealth will stand with them on a path of healing and recovery and their pursuit of justice.
Thank you. Delegate Jones, in recent months, Central Virginia has seen a surge of deadly violence. In fact, just a few weeks ago, a woman and her 3-month-old daughter were killed during a gun battle in a Richmond apartment complex. Later this month, Richmond Mayor LeVar Stoney and members of City Council will introduce a resolution declaring gun violence a public health crisis in the city, and they will seek state and federal dollars to respond. What can you do to help communities where so many live in fear?
Well, my heart breaks when I heard that story about the young woman and that very young child here in Richmond. But that isn't just a situation that's limited to here in this city. In Norfolk, I volunteered at a community center, and after school, these children would talk about how they would hear gunfire pinging across their neighborhoods at night, and they would clutch their sheets or jump onto the ground to avoid that gunfire. We know that we have a gun issue here in this Commonwealth and here across this country. I was proud to stand with Governor Northam, who has endorsed our campaign, to pass gun safety measures last year in the General Assembly, and I would love to see us get an assault weapons ban on the books here as well. I am so proud of my F rating from the National Rifle Association because they know that I have nothing to support of theirs. There is no daylight between the Attorney General and myself in this regard. We both agree that there is an issue with guns here in this Commonwealth, but we've got to use our resources to go upstream. We can't just rely on laws to fix the problem. We've got to go and get into those communities, make sure that we are figuring out what those issues are on the ground and using our platform and our pulpit to help solve this terrible, terrible tragedy here in this Commonwealth.
Attorney General Herring?
We have a gun violence problem in this country and in our Commonwealth. And no elected official in Virginia has done more to combat gun violence than I have. I took on the gun lobby, and that's why I've got support from Brady, Giffords, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, because they know they can trust me to stand up to the gun lobby and do everything I can to protect Virginians and their families. I fought for those expanded background checks. I fought for the reinstatement of 1 gun a month. I fought for a red flag law. And I'm still doing it because the gun lobby didn't go away. They went to court. And we are winning those cases, and our gun safety laws are still on the books and they're being enforced. We need more of them. We need an assault weapons ban. We need to stop the proliferation of dangerous ghost guns. And we continue to do that, and that's what I'm going to continue to do as Attorney General because Virginians know that they can count on me to protect them.
Delegate Jones?
Well, I look forward to being Attorney General to continue to use these laws to protect people all across this Commonwealth, but I think we've also got to understand that what's at stake. There is a radical Republican ticket that was just nominated a few days ago that will do everything in their power to roll back the successes that we have had over the last several years. I cannot wait to get on this ballot to make sure that we are fighting Republicans up and down all across the state to make sure that we maintain our control of our 3 statewide offices and keep our majority in the House of Delegates. We have come so far. Just a few years ago, the successes that we had would be unthinkable, but now we have an opportunity to continue to build in that regard, to look forward, to look and reach higher heights. And I cannot wait to lead that charge as Attorney General because we won't stay silent. We won't go quietly into the night. This is one of the issues of our time, and I will be there like a brick wall.
All right, thank you, sir. Next question goes to Attorney General Herring. In less than 2 months, it will be legal for adults to possess up to an ounce of marijuana in Virginia. Criminal justice reform advocates have praised the law, saying it will hopefully bring an end to mostly people of color being arrested and prosecuted for minor nonviolent drug crimes. But some law enforcement groups worry that it will lead to an increase in crimes such as drug driving or possession on school grounds. How would you help the state navigate enforcement of this law to ensure both social justice and public safety?
Well, we have a mass incarceration problem in this country, and the weight of this system falls disproportionately on Black and brown Americans. And that's why I called for legalization of possession of small amounts of marijuana before anyone else was even talking about it, because it was the largest on-ramp into the criminal justice system for Black men in Virginia. And so we've gotten there now, and then we also have other work to do on criminal justice reform, like fighting for record expungement and cash bail reform and ending the death penalty, which Delegate Jones and I both worked on to get passed this year. Now, one difference between us, though, is that the bill that Delegate Jones introduced this session was flawed. It had gaping holes in it and would have exposed some defendants to the death penalty. My team and I caught it, we reviewed it, we fixed it, and we made sure that it got done right.
Delegate Jones?
Well, if you've ever been in a prison or a jail here in this Commonwealth, you know that the faces that dot those cells are Black and brown Virginians. And a lot of them have been put there because of possession of marijuana. I'm so proud to stand with Governor Northam to make Virginia a leader in the South, to be the first one in our region to legalize marijuana. And that is a major accomplishment that we should all be very proud of. But we can't rest on our laurels. We have an opportunity to look ahead and build a justice system that works for all. I'm interested that Mark brought up the death penalty in his response because he was against it before he was for it. When he was in the Senate, he voted 16 times to preserve the death penalty. I have long been opposed, and I worked and stood with Governor Northam to get that done. I was there at Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia, when he signed that historic legislation to abolish the death penalty, just steps away from where we have an electric chair chamber that we'll no longer use. This is about leading the way. It isn't about you doing things when they're politically popular. It's about taking those tough stands, and I will do that as Attorney General, and I look forward to that opportunity.
Attorney General?
Well, actually, Delegate Jones and I, like a lot of Virginians, have come to see this as something that needed to be abolished. And as recently as last year, Delegate Jones said he would support lethal injection as a last resort. Now, we both worked to get it repealed this year. That's the good news, but the real difference between us is that he introduced legislation that didn't get the job done right. We went in and got that fixed. And this was a pattern that we see with Delegate Jones. At critical moments, when there are opportunities for him to lead, he doesn't get it right. Like on his civil rights legislation that ended up, if passed, would have actually rolled back civil rights protections for women, LGBT Virginians, veterans, and people with disabilities. This job is too important to be in the hands of someone who continues to make mistakes like that at critical moments.
You have 30 seconds, Delegate Jones.
Well, look, Bill, there he goes again, talking about this issue when we both know that when you were Attorney General just last year or 2 years ago, you were defending the state to keep those processes secret. Well, what we have to focus on is forging ahead and how we use that civil rights office that's at your disposal. Not standing idly by while Donovan Lynch is murdered by police in Virginia Beach. Not standing idly by while Isaiah Brown has 10 bullets in his back in Spotsylvania. Those communities are clamoring for issues, and as Attorney General, I will never play politics with people's justice and pick and choose when to step up and step in.
Thank you, and I believe the Attorney General did address that question in Virginia Beach. Delegate Jones, this is for you. A recent poll from the Wasson Center at Christopher Newport University found most Virginia voters consider themselves to be moderate, even leaning conservative. But those same people currently support Democratic policies regarding health care, immigration, the environment, and economic fairness. The researchers say this November's elections will show whether voters feel that Virginia Democrats have moved too far with their progressive legislative agenda. So, how would you sell yourself to this moderate voter?
Well, I certainly think that the policies that have been enacted by the Democratic majorities over the last couple of years reflect the values of the Virginia of today. This is not the Virginia of 2017. It is not the Virginia of 2013. This isn't my parents' generation. This is a Commonwealth that is rapidly diversifying and rapidly growing. And we have different faces and new voices at the table, and that's a good thing. And I think our policies reflect the voters' concerns and the voters' issues. And I look forward to continuing to fight for those progressive policies as Attorney General, to beat Republicans in the fall, up and down the ticket, and make sure we maintain our majorities in the General Assembly so that we continue to build, so that we can build a justice system that works for all, that brings about true and equal justice for all and not just some. We have a historic opportunity here in this Commonwealth, and I look forward to leaning into this chance to make sure that we can cement and solidify the gains that we've made, and I know that I'm that person, and I can't wait for that opportunity.
Attorney General?
When you stand up and take bold actions for Virginians and protect them and expand their rights, they support you. That's why I've broken barrier after barrier, done groundbreaking work in so many areas, even when at the time wasn't necessarily popular, like going into court and fighting for marriage equality and winning, and protecting our immigrant communities, and fighting for women's rights, equality, so many different things, marijuana reform. Many of these things, even Democrats came to me and said, you may be moving too far, too fast. It might not be good politics, but I did it because it was right. And I did it to support my fellow Virginians. And that is what I have found is when you stand up and you fight for them, they will support you. Whether it is going all the way to the Supreme Court to protect their health care, whether it is protecting our census, whether it is fighting for their right to marry the person they love, they will stand with you.
Delegate Jones?
Well, I will say this. I think that Governor Ralph Northam has been the most consequential governor that this Commonwealth will ever see. And I am proud to stand with him on all of the achievements that we've made. And that's why he's endorsed my campaign. He sat next to Mark in the Senate, ran on a ticket twice with him, and still decided to choose me because he knows that we have the vision and the values and the energy and the conviction to meet this moment here in the Commonwealth. We have, like I said, a historic opportunity, and I hope that we lean into that, and I will use all of my energy and resources to make sure that we do so. But we also have an opportunity here to highlight those voices that have been traditionally left out and left behind. We are a Democratic Party that is inclusive, that is the big tent. And I hope that as we move towards this Democratic primary, we will highlight those voices and highlight those faces in ways that we've never seen before.
Thank you. Attorney General Herring, this will address some of the questions we've just dealt with in the last few moments. Some say that a politician's record speaks for itself. Others say people evolve, and changing your opinion on something is not always flip-flopping. Can you describe an issue that you have evolved on over the years?
Well, sure, and Delegate Jones and I have talked about it already tonight. You know, he and I, as well as a lot of Virginians, have come to see that the abolition of the death penalty needed to happen because it was too often disproportionately applied. The risk of making a mistake was so high, and we've come together and we've done it. Unfortunately, the legislation he proposed didn't do the job right. My team and I went in, got it done right, corrected those mistakes, and that's a pattern that we've seen with Delegate Jones. like his civil rights legislation, that was going to be his landmark signature legislation around which he was going to center his campaign. Ended up, it turns out that it would have actually taken people's right to sue away if they suffered discrimination. It would have rolled back protections for women, people with disabilities, LGBT Virginians. And that's really a big difference between us, is that I have shown that I can deliver results on even the most important issues when it matters.
Delegate Jones.
Well, I can't let Mark put words in my mouth. I've always been opposed to the death penalty. I didn't vote 16 times to preserve that practice when I was in the Senate, and I certainly didn't defend those processes from being conducted in secret when he was Attorney General. And I haven't evolved on civil rights like it seems that he has, seemingly because of what happened 2 years ago when he was apologizing to us without any empathy, compassion, emotion, because he wore blackface, but he was doing it to preserve his political career. I don't play politics with people's civil rights. I don't play politics with justice. This is personal to me. As a black man, when I walk out of this studio, I am just as susceptible to being targeted by a police officer or being profiled by somebody because of the color of my skin. I don't have the luxury to walk around, as some of the other folks in this studio do, and then come in here and try to lecture me about what's happening. I evolve on issues as well, but my commitment to justice, my commitment to the people of Virginia, my commitment to making this justice system work is unflinching, and I'm insulted that Mark would even try to say anything otherwise.
Attorney General.
I have made protecting and expanding the civil rights of all Virginians the cornerstone of my administration. And I have fought for civil rights, and our office has been a civil rights office from the beginning of my administration. And when we went to make it a permanent feature so that future generations of Virginians would know that protecting the civil rights of Virginians would always be a part of its mission, in 2019, with Delegate Lopez and others, Delegate Jones wouldn't work with us in 2019 to make it a permanent part of our office. And it was presented to his committee, and he didn't do anything. Now that he's running for office, he decides he wants to make it a centerpiece of his campaign. That's great. But so much of that is stuff that is work that we've already been working on. And that's why it's important to focus on that. And when he put it forward, it ended up, if it had passed, would have rolled back civil rights. It would have been the biggest rollback of civil rights in modern Virginia history. This job's too important to be in the hands of someone who gets it wrong and makes wrong choices like that.
All right, we're going to move on. Delegate Jones, this goes to free speech. While Facebook is facing a backlash over its plans for Instagram Kids for children under 13, disinformation on social media remains a serious issue, especially in regards to maintaining a well-informed electorate. What can be done at the state level to balance free speech with access to accurate information about everything from public health to political candidates?
Well, certainly we've seen some very terrifying developments as it relates to social media and how it is used and how people are spreading the disinformation. At the state level, we have passed a landmark data privacy law that I was proud to support that would protect not just children, but all Virginians from attacks and from phishing and from all of those practices that have seemingly become commonplace today. As Attorney General, we want to reimagine this old office in a new way and deploy the resources at our disposal to make sure that we are rising to meet this moment, whether it's justice reform, consumer protection, protecting our children on social media. The Attorney General has a major role to play in this, and you've got to insert yourself in that conversation, whether you're supposed to or not, because we need someone who's going to lead and not follow, someone who's going to rise to meet the challenges of this moment. I remember when Facebook became a thing. I remember you had to have a college email address to do so. So this has become an issue that I have been very familiar with over the course of my life, and in particular as in the legislature, as we have tackled those things, and I look forward to continuing to be a leader in that space as Attorney General.
Attorney General?
Nothing could be more important than protecting our children. And that is a top priority for me and my team. That's why when I heard that Facebook was coming out with an Instagram for kids 6 to 12, I immediately called on them to change those plans and stop. You know, the internet, predators are able to hide behind the internet and its anonymity. Cyberbullies are able to hide behind the anonymity of the internet. And protecting our children is so important. And that's why we also do so much work to protect them from exploitation. They're some of the most difficult cases, but also some of the most important cases, because it seems like predators know exactly how to prey on children and get them to do things that once they're out on the internet, you can't get them back. And that's why we are investigating hundreds of cases every year to protect our kids from exploitation.
Delegate Jones.
Well, I think Mark and I agree in this regard. We have to protect our children at all costs. They are one of the most vulnerable populations here in the Commonwealth. And as Attorney General, we will continue to be vigilant and continue to use all of the resources at our disposal to make sure that we are protecting them. These are challenging times with the hack on the Colonial Pipeline, with the things that we're seeing on social media, the sort of terrible situation in Washington on January 6th that was seemingly fomented by social media. We need an Attorney General who understands these challenges at this moment and will lean in and will step up and reach for higher heights. And I know that I'm that person, and this will be one of the centerpieces of our administration.
All right, thank you. For this last question, you'll each get 1 minute. There will be no rebuttal. Time is getting a little bit tight at this point. Attorney General Herring, Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country are passing a raft of voting measures right now that restrict absentee voting, early voting, and in some cases, who actually does the certifying in the state election. While Virginia has passed broad voting protections, what can be done to ensure that those protections don't go away should control of the GA and governor's office change parties?
The freedom to vote is one of the most foundational freedoms of our democracy. And I have a voter protection team that has worked to make sure that Virginia's elections are safe, free, fair, and accurate. Even with all of the challenges that we had last year with the pandemic, with Donald Trump and his supporters trying to undermine the integrity of the election, even accidents where a contractor cuts a fiber optic line to the state's Department of Elections servers. We have worked to make sure that Virginians' right to vote is protected. And when legislation came forward on the Virginia Voting Rights Act, I worked with the sponsor to make sure that our office could enforce it. And as Attorney General, when that law takes effect on September 1st, I will vigorously enforce it and give it a robust enforcement. And when Virginia Republicans wanted to keep their racially gerrymandered districts, I fought them in the Supreme Court and won, and that led to redrawing legal boundaries and a wave of Democratic wins.
Delegate Jones.
Well, Bill, voting is incredibly important to me and personal because I have ancestors who paid poll taxes, who had to take literacy tests, who had their right to vote denied or abridged altogether. And for me, voting is the most sacred and fundamental right that we have as Americans. That's why I was proud to support the Virginia Voting Rights Act this past legislative session to make sure that we enshrine in our state those protections that we saw at in the Voting Rights Act in Washington. But we can't always rely on our friends in Washington to get the job done. That's why we stepped up, and I'm so proud of those things. We've also proposed the creation of a dedicated voter protection unit in this office. This is about redeploying and reorienting the office to rise to meet this moment, to reimagine this office in a new way. But what's most clear is that there are Republicans in the legislature and across this Commonwealth who don't want to build on this progress. They want to roll us back, make it harder to vote, not easier. And as Attorney General, we'll use that office, and I will use my energy to make sure that we are protecting our right to vote every June and every November, every single year.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughtful answers. That is all the time we have for questions tonight. We're going to move now to closing statements, and we start with Attorney General Herring.
As Virginia Democrats, we have a clear choice in this primary between my proven record of protecting Virginians and expanding their rights, or Delegate Jones, who unfortunately his record doesn't match his rhetoric. While Delegate Jones was actually supporting and went to bat for predatory lenders, he opposed stronger protective orders for victims of abuse. And when he introduced his civil rights proposal, it was a disaster and would have actually rolled back civil rights. We have a clear choice here in Virginia. And as Attorney General, I have shown that I have a record that I can win in statewide races. I've done it twice, and I can keep this job in Democratic hands. I've proven that I can take on even the biggest fights and win. As your Attorney General, I will continue to lead the fight and the work to expand protections for civil rights, to build on the work we've done in criminal justice reform, to protect against Republican attacks on health care. And we know they are eager to reclaim this job that they held for 20 years until I broke their stranglehold on it. And we know that their nominee is an anti-choice, anti-health care, NRA Republican who would just take us back to the days of Ken Cuccinelli. and we can't let that happen. And I've got a proven track record to make sure that we can win statewide, keep this job in Democratic hands, and continue fighting for Virginians, and that is what I will do, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on June 8th as the people's lawyer to continue working for you.
Delegate Jones.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you to WTVR. You know, tonight you've heard a lot from Mark about the past. You've heard a lot from Mark about my record, but this is a man who created an animal rights division before a civil rights division. But this election is about the future. This is about being proactive. It's about someone who will lead and not follow, someone who will rise to meet this moment. All the experience in the world doesn't mean a thing if you have to be pushed to do the right thing. Virginians deserve an attorney general who will reach for higher heights, who won't settle for the bare minimum, and who won't do things solely to grab a headline. I am so proud of the fact that we have been endorsed by Governor Ralph Northam, Congressman Bobby Scott, Congresswoman Elaine Luria, former Attorney General Mary Sue Terry, the first woman and last Democrat to hold this office, and more than 30 members of the General Assembly, because they know that we have the vision and the values to rise to meet this moment, to bring about a system of true and fair and equitable justice in this Commonwealth. That has been the issue of our time. It has been my mission in the legislature, and it has been the cause of my life. And as Attorney General, I look forward to using every resource at my disposal to make sure that we can create a Virginia that works for all people, not just some, not depending on where you come from or what you look like. I so look forward to beating the Republican ticket in the fall as your nominee, and I ask for your support in this June 8th Democratic primary, because together we can chart a new course for this Commonwealth and reach for higher heights and strive to build the best Virginia that we deserve.
All right, Delegate Jones and Attorney General Herring, thank you both so much for taking part in this debate. As we all know, open and honest forums are a crucial part of our democratic election process. We appreciate your participation and wish you both good luck. And once again, the Democratic debate for Attorney General has been brought to you by the Democratic Party of Virginia and WTVR CBS 6. We thank you, the voters of Virginia, for watching. As you heard a moment ago, remember, primary day is June 8th. In-person absentee voting is already underway. The deadline to request an absentee ballot to be mailed to you is May 28th. On behalf of everyone who brought this debate to you tonight, I'm Bill Fitzgerald. Thank you and good night.